Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. India's software companies like Wipro and Infosys are in the process of laying off employees on a massive scale. The move has come after the growth in India's $150 billion IT industry has slowed down than anticipated. Earlier in April, the country's apex trade body, ASSOCHAM, had warned about the industry's growth prospect and said that aggravated by rising rupee leading to lower realizations for software exports, the Indian IT firms may be forced to displace workforce. In that case, the chances of layoffs are real. Barely a week after this warning, India's third largest software services firm, Wipro, fired hundreds of employees as part of its annual performance appraisal. According to reports, Wipro's CEO earlier in the month mentioned in an internal conference call that if revenues don't grow, around 10% of employees would be let go this year. Last week, Cognizant Technology Solutions offered its top executives, directors, associate VPs and senior VPs a voluntary separation package as part of its plan to shift operations to automation and digital technology. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will take a look at what is ailing the Indian IT industry. Joining me on the program today are Meera Shankar, former ambassador to the United States and Germany, T.K. Arun, editor, Opinion Economic Times, Srijanpal Singh, IT expert, and Nitin Desai, former Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program. T.K. Arun, I'd like to begin with you, of course. What is ailing the Indian IT industry at the moment?
See, primarily it is slowdown in the world economy. Plus, there is a change, technological disruption happening within the industry. Technology is disrupting everything else. So why do you expect technology not to disrupt its own industry and business? So there's a great deal of automation happening. People are trying to generate more revenue per employee as compared to just adding employees to increase revenue as used to happen in the past. This is a compulsion they have to because the entire business model is changing within the industry. So if earlier you needed to have layers of middle management to supervise the actual work being done by the people who do the work, today you can have software which lets a few people monitor the work being done and the progress and quality of what is being done with just a handful of middle managers. So layers of management is ripe for elimination. So when there is some kind of a business crunch, that is occasion when these kind of shakeouts will happen. And that is what's happening today.
Fair enough. Ambassador, you know, what happened in the United States as far as Donald Trump coming to power and his policies, could they have had any bearing on the Indian IT industry? Because let's not forget, the Indian IT industry is an export-oriented industry, and the policies there in the United States and, of course, Brexit and everything else that's happening around the world could possibly have had an impact on the industry as a whole.
Well, it's a little premature for it to have an impact, but clearly the global environment for our IT industry has become more hostile, more difficult because of protectionism, fears about job losses. But more than that, I think it is really technology which is disrupting the entire way in which this business is conducted. You see, look at what Mr. Trump has done so far. There is a guidance which the Citizenship and Immigration Services has put out, basically saying that the H-1B visas will be used for specialty occupations and only where no Americans are available, and that there will be better enforcement, focusing on those companies which use a large number of H-1Bs. Now, this is actually the existing practice. I mean, this is what the H-1B law was intended for. So they're just issuing a guidance under the existing law. Separately, Mr. Trump has asked for a review to be conducted by the Department of Justice, Department of Labor, Homeland Security, State Department on the H-1Bs and how to ensure that the program is used for specialty high-end occupations and not for low-skilled jobs. So that's an intended review. And then there are draft bills in the US Congress, both in the Senate and the House, which seek to change the terms of the H-1B, to raise the threshold of minimum wages, which is at present $60,000. One proposes $130,000, another proposes $100,000, and then they also propose that instead of the current lottery system for allotment of H-1Bs, the visa should be given to those who pay the most and who get the most skilled people. So in a sense, favoring American companies like Google or Facebook and so on. But those are potential minefields ahead. Right now, I don't think the impact of that is being felt. It will be felt, and already there is a sense that our IT companies will need to restructure their business processes. But at the moment, these layoffs are basically, I think, as a result of technology disruptions. And in fact, NASSCOM itself has estimated that perhaps 25 to 30% of low-skilled jobs in the IT sector may become redundant as a result of digitization, automation, artificial intelligence. Now, while these layoffs are taking place, I think it would be important also to have programs in place to reskill some of these people in ways which would make them employable in the new environment.
Sure, fair enough. Srijan Singh, I'd like to bring you into the picture now. As an IT expert, is this something that you anticipated? Is this something that, that was on the anvil?
See, I think we had discussed about the H-1B $60,000 minimum wage. What we also need to mention is this has been since 1989. Since 1989, H-1B minimum wage has not been revised. So that was something which we should have expected, given that it's almost 3 decades now that no revision has happened in H-1B minimum wage. So there was a gap which we had, which we harnessed very well, and now we need to move on to the next stage. I think there have been reports after reports that engineers and other technologists coming out of Indian universities and colleges are, about 90% of them are anyways not ready for jobs. The job readiness is low. And now it is all the more reason for us to go back into the education system and look at how we train our technologists and our engineers to be job ready for the future, which definitely we can't change it. The future does belong to automation. The future does belong where the lowest level of skills will have to be reskilled. One thing which I must add that traditional model of 17 years, till 17 years a child is in school, 4 years of college education, 2 years perhaps more, and then 40 years of job has to change to a continuous learning approach where we have to reskill not just now for this reason, but this is going to be the trend of the global future where all the time we need to reskill people for not 20 years, but the whole career of 50, 60 years.
Okay, reskilling is the way forward is what we are saying at the moment, but that's going to take some time, isn't it, Mr. Desai? But for the time being, really, as far as the issue itself is concerned, the layoffs and everything else that's happening with these companies, is there more to come is the question, really?
It will come because, frankly, I think the real problem is the various companies rested on too much on their success. They did not realize that they had to evolve and change. One dimension has been mentioned, the technological changes which are taking place, which are making classical code writing less and less relevant and which is making more and more automated. The fact that so much of the new stuff that is happening is in 2 key areas, big data and artificial intelligence. Where are the Indian companies on big data? There are Indians in the United States who are working on big data, but where are the Indian companies working on big data? The other side is they have not adjusted to the changing application requirements. They were working with the first generation of businesses which went digital, banks, etc. There's a new type of requirement which is coming up, for instance, from e-commerce, from social media. What I saw was that Accenture, for instance, has thrived because it has been able to provide services to company on the social media side. I don't know of any Indian company which is a significant player in this space. I'm not sure how many of them are significant players on the e-commerce space. So in a sense, what they've done is they've not been dynamic enough in anticipating changing markets. The beauty of the American system is that it's so open that somebody who anticipates something new happening can easily become a big person. This is what happened with Google, for instance. Google was nothing. at the beginning of in the year 2000, and it was just 2 graduate students from Stanford who had written a term paper, and look where they are now. So I think basically we have to look at our industry differently. It's not just a service industry in the classical sense. It has to become a source of this type of dynamism and innovation. And I think we need a far deeper look than just simply saying, oh, technology hai, theek hai, kar denge, wahan se kuch, or we will employ more Americans, that will take care of the H-1B issue. People have mentioned education. Yes, we can certainly do that, but that will be a long wait, because you can't do much about your higher education till you do something about your school education.
Yes.
What are you going to do with your higher education if you are producing people in schools who can barely read? You've seen the various Pratham surveys and so on. So they'll have to spend more. They'll have to spend more money on reskilling. All that is fine, but it's not just that. I think somehow we need an ecosystem which is more focused on continuous innovation, and that has not happened in our IT industry. They've done a very good job as a service provider. There was a nice little nice spot they found, like China found with manufacturing, we found it with services. But that spot will go away. We have to change. We have to now have a different type of IT industry from what we had over the past 2 decades.
Sure,
So it's a much deeper problem than just adjusting to the H-1B, etc.
Sure.
Instead of the H-1B, I wanted to mention, I still argue that H-1B, the way US operates it, is more a device to protect US capital than US jobs. Because there's a clear discrimination between a US company which wants a person on an H-1B visa and a non-US company which wants to take somebody there on an H-1B visa. She's already mentioned some of the they use, which in effect amount to making that distinction. So let's be very clear. It's a thing to protect the Googles, etc., rather than just to protect American jobs. Because Google is also employing Indians.
Sure. Yes, Ambassador.
In fact, some of the draft bills have been moved by congressional representatives in the House of Representatives who come from the constituencies of Facebook and so on.
Yeah.
So how do we leverage the fact that we are a big market for these companies? Look at Amazon, look at Facebook. We are the second biggest market for Facebook after the US. Look at Google, look at Microsoft. India is a growing market, and given that China keeps US companies out of their market and has developed its own engines, search engines and so on, I think India is the one big major growth story for American companies. How do you leverage this?
Sure, fair enough. I mean, yeah, yes, Srijan, you wanted to make a point. Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to add on what Sir was saying. One of the things which India has recently promoted is the culture of startups. So we've been talking about Startup India, and some of the most innovative ideas could be converted into a startup. We are nascent in it, but that's the process which we need to embark upon. And I've been working with a lot of startup spaces, and some of the ideas which our people, our young guys are working on is absolutely cutting edge. And I think it's high time. We've given the world the CEOs of the Microsoft and the Google. It's time we start giving Google and Microsoft to the world as well. I know in 1990s, when India embarked onto the banking computerization.
You said you're working with startups. When can we see that happening, really? I mean, is there a time frame that we can possibly, see?
See, some of the startups are already in the news, especially the IoT ones and the ones which are enabled by internet. And those are already on board, and some of them, are things like Flipkart, and many others are well-known names. But the current startup policy, which the government and many state governments are also embarking, and many universities are embarking, is absolutely the grassroots levels, where we're getting students and alumni to giving them spaces to start up, giving them the facilities, and even creating funding mechanism. India is one of the most favored destinations for international startup funding. You've got banks from all over the world who are eyeing at Indian companies to fund them as equity investors. So I think in another 2, 3, 4 years, perhaps India will be, if not already is becoming, one of the leading countries in startup space. And I think that's the journey to go. And I was telling you, as 1990s, India was going through a banking computerization, and there was a huge opposition. There'll be job loss, and people will not be able to reskill. And that kind of we waded through very well. We all know now, especially now with demonetization coming in, it's all computerized now. Then in 2000s, the internet came in and we said, no, we'll lose a lot of our traditional jobs and we need to reskill. We'll not be able to do that. We did it very rapidly. And now we are going through a crisis or a time where automation and the whole technological leapfrog is happening again. And India is not just well poised in the future, but even from our past experiences, we are a country which is known to be adaptable. And it's just that we need to design our policy at university levels, education, or even primary education to wade off and be a leader in this new world.
Yeah, I agree. See, just because there has been a slowdown in revenue growth and because they have been forced to lay off some people, it doesn't mean that India's IT industry or these companies are in crisis. They are not. So some of them have actually moved into these new areas. Dr. Desai talked about big data. Now TCS has a division which does fairly decent work with big data.
But there's also talk of TCS shutting down completely. I mean, there are a couple of reports in the media that
No, this is all
that's-
exactly.
If any media man has reported it, he needs his, he must have been some
We
prohibited
have
substance.
pure play big data companies like Mu Sigma. The HCL is moving into Internet of Things. So, all companies are resilient enough to actually understand the needs of the situation and move up. See, the thing is, we had low-hanging fruit, and we would have been mad not to reap that harvest. We have. That phase is over. Now we have to move up the value chain. And so companies are gearing up to do
But
that.
have the
would
Indian
say,
IT companies...
If I may also
yes,
add
Ambassador.
that there are also some shortcuts which our companies could adopt. For instance, acquisitions overseas strategically designed to give them, better technologies and innovation. If they hire Americans, more Americans, hire them at the top end where they bring those technical innovation skills to the company. So there are ways in which the companies could also, it doesn't have to be that you wait till our school people are trained and there are ways to leapfrog.
See, remember this, that increasingly in this business, the returns are going to intellectual capital, not to labor power. I've been giving the example always of the Apple, where 70% of the value accrues to the marketing people, then the people who own the intellectual capital, and the people who mobilize the low-cost risk finance. The actual manufacture which takes place in other countries realizes only 30% of what you and I pay for an iPad. So to recognize that just relying on your fact that you have 1/8 or 1/10 the wages of United States is not enough. See, the ecosystem for innovation will not work if you rely on existing corporations. If the US IT industry had relied on existing corporations like IBM, etc., it would not be where it is today. It is where it is today because it had an ecosystem which allowed the garage man to become a giant, which is how Microsoft started, which is how Intel started. And it's not the big guys, it's not the Xeroxes and the IBMs who are the big players today in the IT sector. I did a report for the government 10 years ago on venture capital. And the thing that I saw, what is missing, you see, we have bright people. We have people with bright ideas. But what an ecosystem for venture capital means is you have to have the person with ideas, you have to have the entrepreneur who knows how to convert that idea into something marketable, and you have to have a financing system which is ready to take a chance and a risk. Lynn and Page, the founders of Google, could get $200,000 to start off, including, incidentally, an Indian was involved in funding that also, because they had nothing. They were just graduate students.
Yes.
Also, one thing more. Lynn and Page's foundational paper on the Google algorithm has a footnote on the first page. And the footnote on the first page is thanking two government institutions for the support they gave for the research. Do not underestimate the importance of what the government should be doing is at that basic end. And then have an ecosystem which allows ideas to flourish and good ideas to get really big and the others to fall by the wayside. That we still don't have. We don't have a system which brings together this technical talent, which we do have. How many of our entrepreneurs have set up a venture capital operation? Now Ratan Tata in his retirement is doing something, I understand. But but the fact is, American companies have set up venture capital operations which are operating in India.
Yes.
But Indian companies have not done that. Indian
there are.
capitalists have not done that.
There are quite
One or two of them.
Indian angel network. I mean, there are
This
many people
started,
who are.
I was a little involved in Indian angel, but they're very, they are more like small things. The scale at which it operates is nothing.
Sure. Okay. I'll tell you what. Let's take the discussion forward now and talk about what needs to be done as an immediate remedy to the problem and what needs to be done in the long run. TK Arun, what needs to be done immediately?
See, there is nothing that should be done immediately. See, these people who have lost their jobs, they, at least in the case of Cognizant, they are being given a fairly handsome severance package. I hope other companies will also treat their former employees well when they leave their employment.
No, but what about their employability in the near future? So all these people who have lost their jobs, employment rate in India at the moment is also, it's dismal at the moment. So what happens to all of these people?
As Sajan Singh said, you have to be willing to learn all through your life. You cannot say that I learned something when I did my BTech, and therefore I am happy doing just that. You have to constantly be willing to learn, and they will have to do that. Any number of courses are available online for free. Beyond that, if there are specialized courses that are required, I'm sure people will come forward to offer those courses.
So the situation is not as dire as it is made out to be, is what you're saying.
Far from that.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Desai, the issue at hand really is, whether these IT companies can survive in the long run or not, and what they need to do. So is innovation at, should it be at the center of everything that the companies do from now on?
The bigger companies will have to start looking for survival. The innovation is going to come from the startups. What you need to look at is, do I have an ecosystem? From my country's point of view, it is not the job of the government to protect company A, B, or C. The job of the government is to protect the sector, to protect the employment, if at all. And for that, what you need is an ecosystem which allows the startups to flourish, grow. I wouldn't worry too much if some of these big companies look at what happens in the United States, where today Elon Musk's Tesla Motors is a larger capitalization than General Motors. Nobody's worried. They're happy that there's this company which has become larger than General Motors. So don't worry about it, and don't overstate this. Look, how many people are losing their jobs? Do you know the 5-6 big IT companies in India employ 1 million people?
Yes.
Now, on 1 million people, on a normal basis, would you not expect a turnover around 50,000 a year? 5%? I mean, just on a normal standard basis, if 1 million people are being employed, would you not expect that sort of turnover? In fact, in the IT industry, it's larger because people move a lot. So let's not get so worked up about 1,000 losing a job here, 1,000 losing a job there. What is more important is that the pace of expansion of jobs, like one company hires 40,000 people. Now that sort of thing is probably going to stop. And that's not a good thing, I agree. That because that created a sense of hope amongst these young, educated types. That, ho sakta hai, I can get into this and do something. Now that hope has probably come down. But the way to revive it is not to protect existing players, but to make it very easy for the new players to grow.
Sure.
We still don't have that.
A better ecosystem is what you've been stressing
financing. Where is the Indian venture capital?
Sure.
Most of our venture capital companies are foreign, Sequoia, etc.
Ambassador, in the long run, what do our companies need to do?
I think our companies have to be nimble. They have to move up the value chain. They have to reskill, and they have to be more innovative. A lot of the H-1B visas or holders or others may not get extensions. So many of the talented people are going to come back to India. Those should be productively used to create this kind of new ecosystem, which will reward not just the wage arbitrage and low-end advantage or low-hanging fruit, as Arun said, but also enable Indian IT companies to really move up the value scale, which will be good for us. This is one thing, that if there is disruptive technology and you don't move with it, you can become like the dinosaurs. So, but one thing is for sure, that the Indian IT industry has shown the ability to be flexible and nimble each time there's been a crisis. So in a sense, the crisis challenges them to be better than what they were.
But only when push comes to shove do they really do something about it.
And the hope comes from new players. For instance, e-marketing, it didn't come from the existing IT players, from new players.
Yeah.
Now the new one which is coming up is payment systems.
Yes.
You know? Now payment systems also are mostly new players
Sure.
who are coming in.
Indeed. One final comment on the program. Trijan Pal Singh, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
See, I think there are two kinds of layovers which are happening. One may be happening because of geopolitical changes, which may be the H-1B or something else. But do remember, these are the best the world has to offer. And these people will either be employed by not US, some other country. So that's really not my concern. And even if they come back to India, well, let's be honest about it. If I just compare Indian companies like Flipkart actually pay twice as salary as American companies such as Amazon. So pay is not really the concern here. My real concern is on people who are probably being laid over because of the fact they are not skilled enough. Now that is a very long-term process, because that, as somebody rightly pointed out, begins at the basic of education. Now we need to give up the whole idea that education leads to a job and then there's a whole job security. It's about being nimble. It's about learning all the time, learning from all kinds of sources, peers, internet sources, continuously evolving yourself, and that is the new reality. Because these are the kind of people, continuous, flexible learners, people who learn fast, unlearn faster. Sometimes unlearning is important. And this is the new world belongs to this generation. And I think India, with one of the youngest population in the world, is perfectly poised to harness this as an opportunity than to look at it as a challenge.
Can I just add one point?
Sure.
See, we are going through a communications revolution with 4G being deployed at very cheap rates across the country. This will create whole new opportunities in healthcare, in financial products and services, in education, entertainment. There are big opportunity. So the challenge will actually be to, fill the people's demand for all these things. And I'm sure those who have the entrepreneurial imagination, energy to meet this demand, they will create enough jobs.
So the demand will be created here and it can be filled here, and we don't have to really send, our experts and some great minds abroad.
That also we can do.
Can I just put one last remark?
Okay, I'm completely out of time. Quickly, 10 seconds. In 10 seconds, yeah.
There was one guy who who applied for a job in Facebook and was rejected, and that person started the WhatsApp.
Okay, sure, fair enough. So there are opportunities abound, and it's just a matter of time to find that opportunity and do good. Of course, on that note, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture, because I'm completely out of time. Meera Shankar, TK Arun, Trijan Pal Singh, and Nitin Desai, thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective. That's all the time we have. See you again next time.